Hello friends, and welcome to another video report from Mission Projects International. My name is Nathan Clark, and I'm here with Cody Francis, who just visited the Pacific island of Papua New Guinea. And Cody, when I think of Papua New Guinea, I think of a distant, very remote place. Tell me about what it's like there.
Well, it's definitely a right perception of it. It's very remote. In fact, I was intrigued as we were flying in. On the magazine, the flight magazine, they said, no matter where you've been before, Papua New Guinea will be your last frontier.
Huh.
And it really is. It's a tropical island. It's just between about 2 and 10 degrees south of the equator. And it's actually a fairly large island. I didn't realize how large it was. I just thought it was an island down there next to Australia. But it's actually the second largest island in the world. And it's split in half. Indonesia has one side, Papua New Guinea has the other, and the island of New Guinea makes up both. And Papua New Guinea, just that one country, is about the size of California. And so it is fairly a large country. And it's tropical, rainforest, very mountainous too. Begins on the coast where it's much warmer, balmier, and goes up very rapidly to a mountain that's higher than any other mountain in the continental 48 of the U.S. It's over 14,000 feet high. And that's where we were a lot of the time, was there in the mountainous highlands.
And what's the infrastructure like there? How developed is the country?
Well, it's, I read after coming back, doing some research on Papua New Guinea, it was downgraded by the United Nations as to one of the least developed countries. There's different classifications. It's not the worst, but it is in that least developed country status now. And it's interesting in that the capital city, Port Moresby, is on the south, and then there's the northern side, and there's a highway that goes from a port from Leh up to the highlands. There's gold mines and different mining operations that go up there, and so there's a paved road, kind of paved, I should say. There's one province in particular, there's landslides there and things, and you're driving along and then there's more potholes than there is pavement. Some places there's no pavement at all because it's just all been eroded away. And so it's a very bumpy ride through those sections, to say the least. And as far as electricity, it has along that main road, there is electricity. You go maybe just 10, 15 minutes off that main road, no electricity. And so that's the only line that there is electricity along.
What are the people like? I know I've heard about cannibalism and things like that in New Guinea. What are the people like there?
Well, they're actually very friendly. I found everybody wanted to talk to you frequently. Some places you're a little bit afraid to take a picture because you're not sure what the reaction of the people is going to be. Well, I knew what the reaction was going to be in Papua New Guinea after a while. Everybody was going to wave and say, oh, take a picture of me. And so they, very friendly, but it is true. They did, it was just 50 years ago that the cannibalism was outlawed. And I would ask them sometimes, I'd say, so is there still cannibalism? Oh, no, there's not cannibalism. How long has it been gone? 10 years. And several people gave me that. And then you hear some stories that maybe it's not all totally gone either, but for the most part it's a pretty safe place to be. But there's also, it's interesting, we were there in the market several times, not a lot, witnessed several fights in the time that we were there. So they were not afraid to take the law into their own hands either.
How many people are there in New Guinea?
Well, it's relatively small for a large area. It's 5 million, 5.5 million, something like that. And it's the largest city. Port Moresby only has about 400,000, not accessible by the northern part where we were. And so most of the population is fairly evenly dispersed in the mountains and the valleys and the rivers and things like that.
What are their houses like? What's it like living there?
Well, by and large, most of it is native material, especially the further off the main track you go, the more native it becomes. And so it's grass-thatched roofing and bamboo woven for the sides and things like that. Very, I mean, nice houses. They keep them clean. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just native material.
Huh. What do they eat? What's the main food source?
Well, the native food source, the predominant one, is cow, or what we would say more like a sweet potato.
Oh, okay.
And it's also interesting. I found it intriguing, at least. They'll frequently have a kitchen hut off to the side, and they'll cook on an open fire there. And as they're cooking, the smoke just kind of goes up and filters out through the grass. So it looks like there's
a house fire.
That this house is just emanating smoke. And I asked them how many times they burn down. They said, oh no, they don't burn down.
Huh.
I don't know how exactly, but they have cook with a fire inside a grass hut.
How do most people make their livings?
Well, where we were, almost all of them were subsistent farmers. I'd ask them, well, what do you do? Well, I garden. So I stopped asking people because everybody told me the same thing, from the pastor to the 17-year-old to the grandmother. They just all garden.
Huh.
In fact, 85% of the entire population of New Guinea are subsistence farmers.
Interesting.
And so it's just they work the land, they eat the land, and they told me, they said something very interesting. They said, we have no famine in Papua New Guinea like Africa. If there's a famine, it's because somebody was lazy and didn't plant their garden. So it's nice that they can be self-reliant and self-supporting.
Yes. Well, you were there to see the work and to look at what's happening in the Lord's work in Papua New Guinea now.
Well, the Lord is really blessing the work there. There's some very dedicated workers, and they have a desire to share the message with all of Papua New Guinea.
How did it get started? How did the work start there?
About 10 years ago, well, actually a little bit before then, there were some young people. They were probably just 20s, 30s, and although the lifespan is about under 60, so 30 is about middle age there, but they were starting, a pastor trained them to do some street evangelism. And so they were excited about it, and they started doing evangelism, preaching on the street. And so as they were doing that, and as they were going, they said, we need to go here and there. And so they were going to different villages and different places. And unfortunately, they got into trouble for that. They were leaders in the churches, but
leaders in the Seventh-day Adventist churches
leaders
already
in the Seventh-day
established.
Adventist churches, but the leadership did not want them to be going and preaching the three angels' message like that. And so there were actually 17 of them that were disfellowshipped. And you know, I was talking with one pastor about the work, and his attitude just encouraged me so much, even after they had been disfellowshipped. And we have a little clip from talking with him about that. Maybe we can just look and see what he says.
Absolutely.
With me is Pastor K. Tefa. So what happened after you were disfellowshipped?
When 17 of us disfellowship, I can remember the biggest mission in Papua New Guinea is Eastern Island Chimpu Mission, where we belong. That's where the things will happen. And a representative from the missions or conference were gathered there in front of more than 2,000 people. 17 names were listed on the board, and just they take 62 votes against only 2. 2 votes says don't disfellowship this 17, and 62 votes they vote us to just.
Was it in the local church, or
yes, in the local church?
And so there were only 64 members of the local church, or what was that?
No, only the hands were raised up in front, but the more than 2,000 people are just surprised, and they did not want to involve in this.
Well, there were more than 2,000 people there.
Yes.
But only 62 voted
only
for.
62 hands raised up to disfellowship us.
And only 2 voted.
And 2 votes says don't disfellowship.
Oh, there were too many mirages in the camp, weren't there?
So by the time we were encouraged, because we saw God's leading this movement, so we don't care either one name disfellowship in heaven or not, but we just have a faith that for the gospel's sake, God will never disfellowship us from heaven. So
yes,
that's where the layman movement begins from 1995.
Okay, so after you were disfellowshipped, what happened then?
When we disfellowship, from day one, was following that was on Sunday, and next week Sabbath we did not come and attend the church where we belong to.
Yes.
We just put another shelter, and those 17 people plus 500 people, sympathizers, our family follow us. We start a new, we begin our own separate home church.
So you said, okay, we don't want to go there. They disfellowshipped us. They don't want us. So you put up a little building.
Yes.
And the 17 that were disfellowshipped, and 500 people came and joined you.
Of course.
So you had a large church just to begin with.
Yeah, we were courageous because we have a number, so we don't care.
And so then, has the work continued to grow from there?
Yes, the work continued to grow because...
so that was in 95, there was one church?
Only one church.
Now, how many churches are there in Papua New Guinea now?
So far we have... recently we have some home churches without building.
Yes.
Some people worship in the home, so we can number together and just make it more than 70 churches in Papua New Guinea.
More than 70?
Yes.
Well, it sounds like the Lord is blessing the work here.
Amen.
And we pray that He will continue to bless it even more and mightily.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's wonderful to see, even though the folks there have faced persecution, have been disfellowshipped, that they're still going out and working for the Lord. And that group of 17 people, what happened with that? How did it grow beyond that?
Well, here they were. They were leaders in the churches. They were doing evangelism. They knew that what they were doing was right. And said, what are we going to do? So they met and they talked about it. They said, well, we're Seventh-day Adventists. We still are.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to be keeping the Sabbath. So we're just going to keep the Sabbath and worship here. So they started the Sabbath. They started their worship service. And 500 people from the churches came and joined them.
Huh.
They said, you're just preaching the gospel. There's nothing wrong with that. We're going to support you in preaching the gospel. And so 17 were disfellowshipped. 500 said, we want to keep doing with this work. And so they had one church with 500. Well, that's quite a big church. So there were a few villages around there, so they started churches in each of those villages. And then they just kept growing. And they kept doing evangelism. They kept doing the street preaching. And as they did the street preaching and as their numbers kept growing, they had a camp meeting. Until now, they're in that territory where it began was Eastern Highlands Province in the town of Kyantu. And there are 40 churches there. So began from 17 that were disfellowshipped, and it grew to 40 churches. And
now, is most of their work with former Adventists, or is this evangelistic work they're getting new members?
Well, they go to the market. They put up a sound system, or if they don't have a sound system, they speak real loud, and they start preaching. And they give the three angels' message. And they're not just giving the same message. Sometimes they devote a week of street preaching to educating about health. Sometimes they do on the sanctuary. Sometimes they do a week on righteousness by faith. They vary their topics some. I was just very amazed at how, not amazed, but encouraged by how they prepare for that. None of them had real high levels of education per se. So they said, we're educated in the University of Nature. And so what they would do is they would go out up into the mountains. Now they're already in mountainous areas, but they would go further out, wouldn't take any food, take their Bibles. And they found bananas or papaya growing there or whatever, they'd eat it. But for a week they'd be there praying, studying, asking the Lord to bless their efforts. Somebody is willing to take a week out of their schedule to pray and seek the Lord. The Lord's going to bless.
Absolutely. And
He did bless. So was it Adventist or just the common populace? It was anybody that was at the market that they were preaching to. And so most of them come from Lutheran or Nazarene or Catholic or just the native Amnist religions. And so they are outreach focused, preaching the three angels' message. Grew to 40 in that area. Now, as there's about 80 churches, 80 bush churches that they've built, and even more branch Sabbath schools. And there are 3,000-4,000 people that they've been able to bring to the Lord. And so the Lord has been blessing these dedicated workers.
And praise the Lord. We will continue with our report, and in our next section we'll be looking specifically at Cody's trip and what he was doing there in New Guinea.
My love for you, Lord.
welcome back to our mission trip about Papua New Guinea. Now, Cody, you went and visited in Papua New Guinea, and tell us about your trip, about getting there and traveling within New Guinea.
Well, it was a challenge to get there, actually, just because there aren't a lot of airlines going to Papua New Guinea. So I had to go through LA to New Zealand, to Australia, and finally to New Guinea. And then the next day I had to fly from Port Moresby, the capital city, to Mount Hagen, which is where we were based for the time we were there.
That sounds like a long trip.
It took a while. We left on, there's the date line in there, but we left on Tuesday and finally arrived in Mount Hagen on Friday.
Oh, wow.
So we were glad to be there.
Yes. Now, were you there on your own? Was someone with you?
No, there was a brother from New Zealand, Brother Doug Hurley, who leads out in a ministry, Autumn Leaves, there in New Zealand, and he is, being there in the South Pacific, he has been shipping pallets and things to some of the islands there. And but this was his first time to Papua New Guinea. We came to kind of work, support each other and work in the camp meeting together.
Oh, wonderful. So you were there for a camp meeting?
Yes, that was, we weren't exactly sure just because it's very hard to communicate there with no telephone lines or things like that. And so we knew there was a camp meeting going on. We weren't sure what else was going on. And as we got there, we started to unravel what the trip was going to be, surveying and the camp meeting and that. And so, yeah, we were there. It was about a week-long camp meeting, and it was a real blessing.
What's a Papua New Guinea camp meeting like?
Okay. Well, it was interesting, just the setup, because I had didn't know what to expect, of course, never been to Papua New Guinea before. And they had anchored bamboo with, like, dug a fence hole or something and then put bamboo standing up. You find that bamboo is used for a lot of different uses in countries like this, not just Papua New Guinea, but around the equatorial belt. And so they put it up and they made kind of a framework of bamboo. And it was probably 25 feet by maybe 40 to 50 feet long, something like that, maybe a little more. So then they had this framework, and then they took and they split bamboo down with a machete to get smaller pieces and started laying them as cross pieces or as purlins.
Okay.
And what was interesting to me was in this entire tent structure, it was only native materials that was used to make it. They brought this wad of plants, and they were used as rope. And so they tied the other bamboo to each other, and then to top it off, then they put a tarp, a canvas tarp, like a blue tarp, like what we have, and that was what was supposed to waterproof it.
What at the camp meeting there? How many meetings did you have, and what was that like?
Okay, we had the camp meeting was the morning was for the Adventists, so we would have 3 meetings in the morning, beginning at 6 o'clock. Not used to having electricity, although we did there, so you'd generally begin at daybreak. And so 6 to about 10 o'clock, there were 3 meetings. Doug would take one meeting, then we would have it, one of the local pastors would, and then I would take the last meeting usually. What was interesting to me there was that here was 150, 200 people, whatever it was out there, and there wasn't a chair. They just sat on the ground. And so, and everybody was content to sit on the ground for
4 hours?
4 hours, yeah. Wow. In fact, it was interesting. It was cool where we were because it was up fairly high in the highlands. Don't know exactly because I can't figure, they don't know exactly, although the, one of the mountains there is actually quite high. So we were fairly high. And so the mornings were always cool, and so the people would, if it wasn't raining, they'd go and they'd be out away from the tent because the sun would be hitting them and warming them up there. And then as it got hotter, you would find more people coming in, and then at night everybody would be in as well.
And then in the evening, what sort of meetings did you have? Were they for the Adventist, or?
Well, they conduct their camp meetings like it was done 100 years ago here in America, and the evening meetings were evangelistic meetings. And so Brother Hurley would take a meeting, and then I would take a meeting, and we would, it was evangelistic type geared meetings. And we don't know, it was hard to tell how many people were coming because the tent was totally full. When it rained, we found that how many people were trying to listen outside as well, because everybody would try to crowd in and it'd get very, very crowded, and people have their umbrellas and all that. And it was going throughout the town. We were told, actually, the pastor, I couldn't tell if the people, if they were Adventists, non-Adventists, whatever, and we were told that there were a number of people coming. They were very impressed, and many of them were drug addicts, actually.
So drug addiction must be a problem there in Papua New Guinea as well.
It's a big problem, especially the biggest, the most common drug addiction is actually the betel nut. And they will chew it, and it actually turns red in their mouth, and everywhere you go there's red spittle on the ground, and it can cause some very serious, it causes mouth cancer.
Yes. So. But the focus of the camp meeting then, I mean, the main meetings in our camp meetings are those evening meetings, and they're evangelistic meetings.
Yes.
How did you attract people to actually come? How did they know about it?
Just set up the tent, basically. It wasn't, we also had, then there was this, they did have a sound system there. A speaker was actually being borrowed from another district. They don't have one of themselves there. But they just set up the speaker, and actually we were told we had had a Sabbath meeting before the camp meeting began on Sunday, and the Lutheran pastor right next to where the church was said, "Are you going to have it in the public? We've never heard a message like this, and we want to come." And so just word of mouth, people seeing the tent, people were standing along the road listening. We brought PowerPoint, which obviously was with the pictures from the beast of Daniel and Revelation, and that was intriguing to them as well. There were a number of people from the community, non-Seventh-day Adventists, that were coming.
Now, you were there for the camp meeting. You mentioned in our last segment that they do a lot of street preaching. Did you have the opportunity to try that?
Oh, I did, and it was, I enjoyed it very much. Kind of like an evangelist dream, really. Because here we have to send out brochures and rent a place and advertise on the radio and whatever. There, all you do is you go to the market and you start preaching. You put up a battery-powered sound system if you have one. You start preaching.
This beast power, after 3.5 years, would receive a deadly wound.
You start preaching. People gather around. 100, 200. They look from their shops over selling at the market. They'll look, they'll stop what they're doing, they'll listen. And even people driving by will look out the windows, they'll stop on the public motor vehicles, stop and listen to what's going on. And you can present the message there. And I found, I'd never done it before, of course. I've done evangelism, but never preaching on the street like that. And felt it had to be short, because people didn't have all day, and powerful, very strong, and then appealing as well. Because some of those people, that might be the only time they hear the message.
Sure.
And very, very effective. People were interested in listening. We had one man who had been studying about the Sabbath. He was a Nazarene lay pastor. And he had been studying about the Sabbath before. He came faithfully to the meetings, was coming to church, started to. And so the Lord really blessed. In fact, we even went up to one day after street preaching, I think, we went up to one of the remote villages at the end of the road. And we were probably 45 minutes away, something like that. And they saw us. Oh, these are the guys that are preaching down at the street. And so word had traveled from that junction all through the surrounding area. Without telephones or anything like that, the bush telegraph works very well.
Interesting. Now, as they're doing this street preaching, are the people friendly to them and to you as you're preaching? What is it like?
Well, they were friendly to me. I would go around and try to talk to the people a little bit afterwards. And something else that was just incredible was after the preaching, they would announce, "We have some free literature that we want to give to you." And they would try to make it go along with the message. When Brother Doug presented on health,
6 we read that God made man in his own image. Inside the book of Genesis chapter 1.
Gave away a Health of the Nations tabloid. And why not ask God about the Sabbath? And I think we won in Pigeon and things like that. And so and the people just mobbed, wanting to get. They heard the message. They wanted to get the literature, and that's how they get out thousands and thousands of pieces of literature. But for me, they were friendly. But unfortunately, when the locals do it, there have been great amounts of persecution. And some of them, one young man, he was our faithful cook while we were there, been preaching since he was 13 years old.
13.
And 23 now. And
10 years of experience, and he's only 23.
Yep, that's right.
With me is Brother Quirin, and he's been a great help to us. He's been our chef and doing our cooking, and we really appreciate it. And Brother Quirin, I'd like to just ask you, when did you become a part of the laymen?
I was become part of laymen when I was 13 years old.
Okay, so when you were 13, what did you start to do?
Street preaching.
Street preaching, huh? And what did people think when they saw this 13-year-old preaching on the street?
Because they wonder because I'm a small boy at that time. I have no beard and I'm just a little kid.
Okay, so they were interested to hear from such a little boy, huh?
Yes.
Yes. And were there people that came into the message as a result of that street preaching?
Yes, many people. Many people, even the youth, especially the youth and children.
So the youth, they saw you preaching and they wanted to know and they joined you, huh?
They joined me.
And they're still in the church today?
Yes, some are still.
And you still like to do the outreaches and street preaching?
Yes, I will still do this until the second coming of Christ.
Until the second coming, praise the Lord.
And he had been preaching, and somebody had come from behind him and taken a big stick and hit him from the backside of the head, knocked him down, had to take him to the hospital. Most all of the street preachers have wounds of some sort and that's what they're taught. You go out and you give the message, but there are going to be those that anything might happen. And so they've endured persecution to give the message.
It takes real self-sacrifice and perseverance to work under those conditions.
That's right.
Now, you mentioned that you were able to go to a baptism. What was that like?
Well, it's obviously they follow the biblical mode of baptism, just like we do here. You have to go to where there's much water. And so we walked I think it was Sabbath afternoon, we walked to the river, about 1.5 miles away, beautiful sunny day. We got there, the wet season started. And it started a tropical torrential downpour. And so it started raining, but they were there and going to do the baptism anyway. So they're trying to protect the sound equipment by sitting on it, and there's some that are trying to huddle under umbrellas and whatever, but there were very few people that left that baptism dry. But it was still a great blessing to see those, even in the midst of rain, and that to give their life to the Lord Jesus. And they have baptisms frequently. They're they're always working with new people and preparing them for baptism. They make that stand, and then they put them in as workers into the cause, too. I mean, they don't let them be idle. We were talking to one, and she said, we asked, so how long have you been studying? Why did you want to be baptized? She says, this is the truth from the Bible. So I've been studying 1 year, 2 years. I want to make that stand for the Lord.
Amen. Well, it sounds like the workers there have had very minimal outside help. How do they support the work?
Well, I was quite impressed. They're all subsistence farmers, and if they have a camp meeting on Sabbath, they like to give food to the people. So they plant a camp meeting garden, and they showed us. They lined up the food and giving them to each of the different areas there, and they said, I asked them, so which did you buy and which did you grow? He said, we could normally grow all of it, but this one was a little bit shorter notice. So, and then there was just a little bit of cabbage and a little bit of broccoli or something that they didn't grow in the whole mound of food. The rest of it, they grew for their camp meeting garden. They do the same thing for one church, raised the money to build a church, not just a bush church, but an actual permanent church with cement footings and wood and tin roof and everything. by growing cow, by growing their sweet potato. Within a couple of years, everybody pitched in and were able to raise money. And I asked them, you didn't get any other support? No, just growing and selling the cow.
A beautiful concept, an offering garden.
And they do the same for evangelism. They're going to do an evangelistic series, and they're say, okay, let's set aside, this is an offering garden. They grow it, they sell it for whatever they can, and they give it to the Lord.
Well, friends, in our next segment, we're going to be looking at the work as it progresses there and the needs there in Papua New Guinea.
Suppose you believe, not me, believe you mean of good one time. Now Holy Spirit by come down.
Welcome back, friends, to our mission report on Papua New Guinea. And Cody, tell us about the potential for the work there. What's going on in the ongoing work?
Well, the potential is tremendous because there are so many workers there, and not just are there so many workers, but there's tremendous potential just to go out and preach on the streets and to raise up a group of believers from there. Many places there's the problem that the work can't advance so fast is because a lack of workers. But in Papua New Guinea, it doesn't seem to be like that. There's probably 40, 50 people that are qualified to go out and do street preaching and that would love to be going out and doing that.
Can you tell us some specific examples of people, individuals who are working?
Well, where we were most of the time, there in the Western Highlands province, we were staying at the place where the district pastor there is staying, Pastor John Yance. And he is such a dear man, and he's doing such a tremendous work. In fact, he translated for me doing the street preaching, and there'd be many times that after the message was over, he would just encourage, appeal with the people. You've got to make a decision because of these truths are eternal. And I couldn't tell exactly what he was saying because he was saying in Pidgin. But, and he's such a humble, self-sacrificing worker. He was, as he was there, I noticed that on Sabbath, all the time, the only thing he had was a worn-out pair of thongs. And so I left for him my pair of shoes, and they were about 2 or 3 sizes too big, but he just couldn't express his joy over that. And he told me, he said, you know, I could have gotten some, but I see so many of the other church members, and they don't have anything. And it makes me feel bad, so I've just been happy with thongs. And I was actually able to interview him and to just ask a little bit of how the work got started some and then how it's expanded.
Yeah, let's take a moment and watch that interview.
With me is Pastor John Yuans, and you're the district pastor of the Western Highlands area, correct?
Yes.
All right. And how many members are there in this area?
About 250 church members.
So there's about 250 church members. Okay, very good. And so the church members have been increasing since you've been a pastor here?
Yeah, I saw the Lord richly blessed, and it's every day in increase.
Oh, praise the Lord. And how do you get most of the new members?
By Bible studying, and one of the important is medical work, missionary work.
Okay, so you do medical missionary work too?
Yeah. Medical missionary works and distribute tracks.
And do you do the street preaching also?
Yeah, street preaching also.
So with Bible studies and tracts and medical missionary work and street preaching, then this is how the members keep coming in.
Yeah, it still keeps coming in.
Praise the Lord. And how many are there in the baptismal classes?
Oh, so far now we have about 38.
38 in baptismal classes that are preparing for baptism.
Yeah, preparing for baptism.
And then you have a class ready when there's interests that are coming to church but they're not ready for the baptismal classes yet. And how many are in the class ready in your district?
408.
So there are 408 that are coming to church regularly, but they're not quite ready for the baptismal class yet. But as the Lord continues to bless, they'll join the baptismal class, right?
Yeah.
Oh, praise the Lord. So there's going to be many more members very quickly, right?
Well, it's wonderful to see just the smile on Pastor John's face.
Yes.
Tell us a little more about some of the other workers there.
Well, there's another worker. Pastor John is everybody says, his strong point. And you can tell it just by the few minutes or a few seconds we looked at here, that is personal work.
Yes.
He has that smile, as you mentioned. He feels deeply with the people and comes real close to them. But there's another brother that he works with, and what he loves to do is street evangelism. And so he's actually the only one that has a sound system there in the that whole area of the Western Highlands and the other provinces that it takes in. And I asked him how he got that sound system. And he had been preaching on the street just without anything. And as he had been preaching, he said, you know, he said to the people, you believe this message. And you see it's true, but we want to be able to share it with more people. We're not here to make money. Many people, if they preach on the street from the other churches, they ask for money or things like that. But he says, we just want to see this message go forward. And would you be willing, people on the street, those that are chewing betel nut and all sorts of things, and he says, would you be willing to help us get a sound system?
Now with me is Brother Robert, and he is the evangelist for the Western Highlands Province area. Now, as you have a little portable speaker system there, how did you get that portable speaker system?
What I did was I bought a small amplifier with a small on speaker, but then it cannot reach far ranges. So what I did was I was start looking for a big one. So I started collected the donation in the state. After my preaching, I started having to talk. I want a bigger and a better one. So if you're willing to give me something, because I'm not new to you and you know who am I and what message have I got for you people, you know it. So if you want to help me, then just one day collection. There was a fellow came and write a check worth of 200 kina, and then everybody they collected everywhere in the street, and then they gave me something about 600 kina. And then I bought that one from a fellow.
Okay.
Who sold to me at 600 kina.
600 kina. So you just raised it from the street one day?
One day.
Well, thank you for sharing, and we pray that the Lord will bless your work and that it will expand even greater.
And he goes everywhere. Said, well, how often do you go and do street preaching? Oh, we're gone for 2, 3 times a month, for a week at a time.
Wow.
So he's out going there.
So he's basically constantly out preaching.
The only time is not as if he needs to tend to his garden some and things like that. And many people, I mean, everybody in the area says that he's the street preacher, he's the one that the Lord has given that gift to, and he just goes out from one village to another. And it's just wonderful to see how and he said, I asked them how they're able to support, because it costs a little bit for the transportation and things like that. He says, we grow enough food for ourselves, and then we try to grow a little more that we can sell, and use that for doing the transportation or the offering gardens that the others are doing. It's just a tremendous work that's going forward.
Now, you mentioned about, when we were talking about the Dorcas work that they're doing there as well. Can you tell us about the Dorcas work?
Well, we met with some of the Dorcas ladies in one area there, and Brother Doug Hurley, who was with us there on the trip, and tremendous help there. And he had sent over some pigeon tracks and some clothes in just a pallet from New Zealand. and they were sharing what they were doing. They had taken those clothes, and the pastor that had gone to some of the remote villages, very remote, where they don't even have clothes like we have. They just have leaves and things like that they're wearing, and he would give it to them. Others, the needy ones in the area. And these Dorcas ladies said they spend one day every week, I think it was Tuesday, and they go to somebody in their area that needs help, an orphan, an elderly person, a widow, something like that. And the church ladies, the Dorcas, descend upon the house. They clean it from top to bottom. They cook food. They wash the clothes. And if they've been able to raise a little bit of funds, they'll give them some oil or some salt or something like that they can't grow, and visit somebody in the hospital. They said people are becoming interested in the message from that as well.
Absolutely. Oh,
and so it's just, I mean, you see the pastors and the evangelists out there working, you see the Dorcas ladies. Something else I thought was just very encouraging was the young people want to go out there. One of our friends that was with us there, and he studies into health. And they found that health is a very effective way of helping to treat people there and to develop an interest in the gospel. And so the Baptist radio station has given him a free slot on their radio to talk about health. There's others, I think we mentioned earlier about Quirin, the young man, 13 years old, he began doing street preaching. And he said he's not real tall now, but he was especially not very tall then, and people were amazed to see this little boy preaching. And said the other children would come around and look around, and they'd make decisions. Now he's in his early 20s, but he still has a burden to go out there, even though he's been beaten and things like that. He wants to give the message.
Oh, praise the Lord. What are some of the new areas that they're looking to expand into?
There's so many new areas because there's so many villages all scattered throughout the mountains. And the handicapped, there was some people we talked to at the camp meeting, they said, I'm from this area, Jimmy. So how far is that? Oh, it takes about 2 days to walk to. And so you can do it in one day if you get up at like 1 in the morning and walk until way late at night. And so there's these villages all over. And they can just go to. One area we went to was an area where there had been tribal fighting. And tribal fighting can be a large problem there. One area was declared a national emergency while we were there because of tribal fighting. Unfortunately, they've been able to import guns, and it's not just machetes, it's even worse than that now. And this war had been going on for 20 to 30 years over land rights and things like that in that area. The government said, all right, we're not going to give you any clinics or roads or anything like that. You guys just fight it out and let us know when you're done, basically. The plantations left, and so finally, after 30 years, they made a truce, and things started to, well, we walked through there. Can't drive there, you just have to walk there. And we went to a couple new churches that had been established there. It was interesting when we went there, we had to walk, and then to get to the next church, we had to ride across the Wagi River on inner tubes. And there was a ferry service. A guy would just, with his feet, push you across the river with just by kicking. And so it was a little bit.
So did you stay dry, or were you inside
the... There was no way. I mean, my legs didn't stay dry, I'll put it that way. 4 people to an inner tube. And but one of the churches we visited there was right on the front line. And they said, this is the house, this is right where one of our brothers was just baptized. And it turns out he was the protector for the village. He was the warrior. And so he would guard the village. But he had said, I never had the joy and the peace, so he gave his heart to the Lord, was baptized. And the rest of the village, they became very afraid. This just happened. They said, our warrior has now been baptized. We need to follow the Lord too, so we can have the protection of angels, because we don't have the protection of our warrior anymore. And so that was very, very lovely, just talking to him, seeing that area there, how the work is expanding there as well.
Praise the Lord. Well, as you're looking and evaluating the work that's going on there, what are some of the needs that they have?
You know, they're very, as I talked with them, I felt that they were very humble. They did not, they said, you know, we're happy to grow our gardens. That's fine with us. Get a little bit here or there. That's fine for salt or whatever else. Said, we need help with facilities and the tools to do evangelism. And so they said, you know, what we really need is the church has divided Papua New Guinea up into 5 districts. They said, we need portable sound systems that our young preachers can put in a backpack with a battery and a horn and go up into the villages and start preaching. There's a few that they had, but they said, you know, we'd love to have 3 in every district. And it would be tremendous. The workers are there, but it's just the means, the facilities to do it are not there.
And they can support themselves with the gardens, but to buy something like a sound system, unless there's an offering from the people, it's very difficult to buy something like that.
Yes, yes. It's about, for one of those sound systems, it's about $400, something like that. Not big money for us, but for them, that's when you're living on, when you're a subsistence farmer, that's enormous.
Yes.
So those portable sound systems that it will enable them to go up into the mountains, preach at the villages, and people will come and people will make decisions.
So about how many of those are needed?
About 15, actually. So then another area, we experienced it firsthand ourselves, when they have camp meetings. Now they do street preaching, but then they have their camp meetings. I asked them, if you had it doesn't cost them very much to do a camp meeting, but if you had the things to do a camp meeting with, then how many would you do? Well, they said one or 2 a month. So that would, the street
It's
preaching,
like an evangelistic meeting.
It's an
at the same
evangelistic
time,
series. That's exactly what it is. And it's stronger because they're able to set it up in the tent and everybody comes in the evening, and so it's not just those that happen to be at the market that day. I mean, that's a powerful way, but they found camp meetings to be very effective as well. And they said, and when we were there, they had these blue tarps that they put over, and the problem with it is they were renting or borrowing it from those that were using it to dry coffee. And when they dry the coffee, they'll put it out there, and then if it rains, which it did about every day when we were there, they fold it over. Well, you imagine what happens when you're folding it over all the time. Creases,
doesn't start to work so well to keep the rain out, probably. And
in our meeting, we would be preaching, and in the evening, the evangelistic part, the most important part, it would rain, and most of the congregation would be getting wet, including the speakers, and and even once it stopped raining, it'd still be raining inside because of all the drips from, and so I said, how much would it cost to get good canvas? Because they actually had one good canvas, one in all of Papua New Guinea that the church had. It takes 3 canvases for one camp meeting tent. They said, about 300 kina, about $100 US, something like that, for one canvas. So for 3 to set them up is just $250, $300. And each area, those 5 areas, it would be so helpful to them to be doing those evangelistic meetings.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they just had but they're not able to raise the funds for that, and so they keep using the dripping shower leaking tarps that they rent.
So it sounds like tarps could be something inexpensive for us, but they could really help there.
Really help the work. I wish we helped in the Western Highlands. We got a set for them of 3. I wish we would have got it before the camp meeting instead of at the end of the camp meeting, but nonetheless, they have it, and they were so happy. When we came back with those tarps, they were just, all the church that had gathered around, oh, thank you, and they were coming up and hugging us and just thrilled to receive that to help the work. And that was something that they wanted. We talked with them, what were some of your needs? They said, we don't want it to go to us, we want it to help the work as a whole.
Praise the Lord.
They want the work to be helped, even though they don't have real shoes, even though they're living on a very meager stipend or allowance or whatever, garden, whatever you look at it. And they want the work to go forward.
Oh, that's the spirit that the Lord can work with.
Yes, yes. Another area was that they really felt a need for was what they call a permanent missionary. Once they've been to an area, it's a new area, they've preached, and there's interest. What do you do then? The street preacher has his family back in wherever in his garden. He's got to go back there. What they need is people that would be willing to go there and stay there, to follow up the work for a year or whatever. And I asked them, I said, so do you have people that would be willing? Oh, we have people. That wasn't the question. He says, we just don't have the funds. He said, you know, if they're there, the people are willing to give them a spot to garden, they can raise all their own food. They just need a little bit for travel, for soap and this type of things.
The things that you have to buy, a few of those small things.
You can't grow everything.
Yeah.
And so it was, said, so about how much? I said, well, about 20 to 40 US dollars, I'm translating.
Per month.
Per month. 20 to 40. Now you just think about that. That's, what, 250 to 500, something like that, a year.
Yeah.
To put a permanent missionary in there that's going to be doing Bible studies. He's going to be doing street preaching. He's going to follow up the interest. He's going to be helping to get them to build a bush church. He's going to establish the work. For just $300, $400, $500 a year, we can put a worker there.
Because they're self-sacrificing, and
Yes.
because they're doing much of it themselves. They just need that extra help.
That little bit. And there's probably no limit to how many you could put of those. And I mean, you could probably put 20 or 30 of those throughout Papua New Guinea. And as there's more converts and more areas to enter, it's just going to keep expanding. And so it's something that I looked, I said, you know, this is a legitimate need. They're not asking for a car or something like that. Oh, sure, that might be helpful to them, but they want practical things to help the work go forward and cover New Guinea.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
And as I think about that and what we have here and what they have there, I mean, many of them, they're walking to the market through the filth of the market with bare feet because they don't have shoes. They're sacrificing, they're working in their gardens, and you know, what can we do for them? We have all the comforts here. You know, I was just thinking about it, and in the New Testament there was a time when there were some brethren that needed help. And as the brethren needed help, the church did what they could to help them. And it was when there was the famine in Jerusalem. And the people said, you know, our brothers there, they need help. And it says in Acts 11:29, then the disciples, every man according to his ability, determined to send relief unto the brethren which dwelt in Judea. They determined to send relief. They did, every man according to their ability. And you know, maybe we can support, say we want to support one worker for a year. Maybe we want to buy one portable sound system to help some of these young evangelists or the street preachers to go up to and enter a new area. The areas are all over, and the needs are there. And they've been going forward. They've been doing what they can. Obviously, there's 80 churches. There's a few thousand members now. There's more baptismal candidates, more interest than there are members even in some of these areas. They're working. And they're just asking for a little bit of help to help push the work even further. And, you know, as I think about that and think about what can we do to help the work. And we're going to be working with Brother Doug Hurley in New Zealand. He wants to get some more clothes and shipping them with pallets and pigeon tracks, and wants to help with getting those portable speakers in there. Brother John Wolfe in Australia has been getting literature and been working there for many, many years. But it's the more that we can help, the faster the work is going to go forward there. And to warn them of the soon coming Savior, that is, the second coming is coming so close. And so I want to ask you, as I look into my own heart and ask and say, what can you do? What can I do to help the brethren there, to spread the message, to take the three angels' message further and further throughout New Guinea?
Amen.
If you have questions or would like to support this project, you may write us at Mission Projects International, P.O. Box 59656, Renton, Washington 98058, or call us at 1-800-467-4174. or email us at info@missionspro.org. You can learn more about some of the other missions projects that we are involved in by visiting us on the web at www.missionspro.org. Let us work together to take the everlasting gospel to every nation and kindred and tongue and people.